The RER is a key part of the fabric of Paris, as are the through-running subways for Tokyo, and now London has both Crossrail and Thameslink. High-frequency cross-city regional rail service is a game-changer in basically every city it's implemented in, because it can do for a region what a subway does for a city, compressing time and space and allowing people to travel across a region with the same level of convenience that they previously could travel across town with. The New York region would be completely transformed by an RER of its own, and now the Effective Transit Alliance has released a pretty detailed vision for just that. So often, transit doesn't get better in our cities because nobody's articulating a clear vision of what a better future could look like. So let's look at the plan and what a New York region transformed by world-class regional rail could actually look like. Hey there, if you're new around here, my name's Reece and I run RMTransit, a channel about public transportation around the world. So how does regional rail work in New York today? Right now, there are three major suburban railways in the New York metro area. Metro North Railroad, which operates to the north of New York City into Grand Central Terminal. The Long Island Railroad, which operates services from Long Island into Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, Penn Station in Midtown Manhattan, and Grand Central Terminal, or Grand Central Madison, depending on what you want to call it. Finally, there's New Jersey Transit, which operates suburban rail services to the south, west, and northwest of New York City in New Jersey, across the Hudson into Penn Station, as well as to Hoboken, which is across the river from Manhattan. To be clear, today, no service in New York through runs. That is, today, you can't get on a suburban train on one of the three sides of New York and ride through to another side without having to change trains. And yes, the Northeast Regional and Acela services from Amtrak do exist, but they're not meant for regional scale travel. Now, since Amtrak trains do through run, I should explain the tunnels a bit. Right now, running into Manhattan, there is the 4-track Metro North Corridor, which is on a viaduct and then underneath Park Avenue into Grand Central Terminal, where all the tracks terminate. The 4 tracks of the East River tunnels, which connect both Amtrak and Long Island Railroad services west into Manhattan from Long Island, and the 2-track Hudson tunnels, which connect both Amtrak and New Jersey Transit services from New Jersey into Manhattan. To be clear, officials already say that services through run, or more accurately, they say they run through because officials seem to have this tendency to have to say everything the opposite to the way the public says it. Anyways, what they really mean when they say this is that trains through run to a yard. New Jersey Transit trains go to Sunnyside Yard in Queens, and Long Island Railroad trains go to the West Side Yard on the west side of Manhattan, under Hudson Yards. To be fair, this is technically through running, but it's not for passengers, and so it's a real word of the law rather than spirit of the law situation. Unfortunately, the major regional rail project for New York over the last decade and more was East Side Access, a project that is interesting but doesn't involve through running. And because it doesn't involve through running, it required a jumbo-sized terminating terminal underneath Madison Avenue, which is cool, but not necessarily valuable for providing a high frequency of through running transit service in the long term. In a lot of ways, East Side Access feels like a bit of a downgrade for people. It meant service getting cut to Penn Station as well as Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, and it will feel like a stranded asset if through running ever happens and you don't need 8 platforms to handle Grand Central's Long Island Railroad trains. But if you want to know more about that, I talked about it in a previous video. This is where the ETA's transformative RERing New York proposal comes in. The proposal would create a through-running regional rail system for New York City similar to the RER in Paris or Thameslink and Crossrail in London. And it would do this over a number of phases as additional signaling, rolling stock, and things like flyovers get implemented and procured. The first phase could actually start in the late 2020s, when Penn Station Access connects Metro North's New Haven line via Amtrak's Hell Gate line to Penn Station, with 4 new stations opening up in the Bronx. But in the ETA's proposal, Penn Access is immediately extended west into New Jersey, and if you operated the Penn Access services with New Jersey Transit rolling stock, you could provide a through-running service from the Northeast Corridor line across into Metro North territory. This would connect New Haven line destinations like Stamford and New Rochelle to locations in New Jersey, such as Newark, Secaucus, and Newark Liberty Airport. And that cross-regional train service could operate quite frequently, every 10 minutes at peak and every 15 off-peak, providing a pretty great basic level of through-running service. Following up on Phase 1, Phase 2 would upgrade the initial service provided by Phase 1, and would probably need a snazzy name like The Line. The second phase would add more service and additional branches, including the Long Island Railroad's Port Washington branch and the North Jersey coastline in New Jersey. The nice thing is that both of these branches already have flying junctions onto both the LIRR main line and the Northeast Corridor, which means you could operate high frequencies onto them almost immediately. These additional branches would connect more destinations in New Jersey with tons of destinations in Queens, and the Port Washington branch, operated at high frequency, would be able to relieve the 7 train, providing many similar connections, including to 61st Street Woodside, Metz Willets Points, and Flushing, as well as beyond. You could also imagine how the fares for this through-running service could be planned such that they're the same as a unified path plus subway fare between New York and New Jersey, allowing people to take the fastest train instead of the most affordable train. What's great about phases 1 and 2 of this plan is that they provide a ton of value but don't require a ton of infrastructure over what exists today. And as ridership grows, there's a ton of potential to increase capacity and improve service levels, including by procuring a fleet of single-level, modern, multi-mode electric multiple units akin to those used on Thameslink, which, by the way, manages 24 trains per hour through central London, with every single train switching from third rail power to overhead line power in the middle. Now, the third phase is where the project starts getting expensive, but not necessarily all that expensive. And the thing I really like about it is that it only requires one major piece of infrastructure to make it work, which New York usually can handle, if you look at East Side Access and the Hudson Tunnels as an example. The Hudson Tunnels project, by the way, is going to quad-track the connection from Penn Station west into New Jersey, increasing capacity but also resiliency by allowing them to shut down the original tunnel and refurb it in a big way. Now, in this phase of the ETA's plan, a new tunnel that would be about 1 mile long would be built to connect Metro North's portion of Grand Central Terminal to Penn Station, the south side of Penn Station in particular, linking it through with the new Hudson tunnels. That would allow high-performance multi-mode EMUs to travel from the Morris and Essex lines in New Jersey, as well as the Raritan Valley line, through to Metro North territory. That would allow services from New Jersey to travel up to Yonkers, White Plains, as well as destinations further along the New Haven line, like New Haven. This would significantly expand the reach of through-running service and the amount of through-running service that could actually be offered. And it would mean new urban destinations like Grand Central Terminal and Harlem 125th Street would get frequent regional rail service, as well as a connection to the new second phase of the 2nd Avenue subway, which just got funded. Now, to be clear, building the Grand Central to Penn Station tunnel is not simple, but it does appear doable, similar in complexity to the westbound tunnel for Crossrail at Tottenham Court Road, which travels above the Northern Line tunnel but below an escalator shaft. The good thing to remember as well is that since this project is just a tunnel and not underground stations, it doesn't need to be all that expensive, since stations tend to be what drive up costs for underground projects. That being said, high-performance EMUs would be a must for this project due to the steep grades needed to travel into Grand Central. Now, beyond the first 3 phases of the project, a lot more could be done, and you can find out more about that in the ETA's report, which I'll link in the description. They talk about what you could do with the Atlantic branch, Hoboken, the Empire Connection, and a lot of other ideas, so it's worth checking out and sharing with your elected representatives. For one, a bunch more stations would need level boarding with high platforms to allow for more frequent service. And you'd probably also want to look at rebuilding the Port Washington branch for more accommodating loading gauges and overhead line electrification, just to make your options more flexible. You'd also want to add a few more big urban infill stations to provide more benefit to the urban areas where the trains are passing through rather than just the suburban ones, but also so you could disperse transfers between services from just Penn Station to more stations. Penn Station itself would also need reconfigured and improved platforms and passenger flow over time, but again, that could be something that you gradually phase in, and it's definitely possible. You'd probably want better signaling, more crossovers, flyovers, and grade separations. But the nice thing about this plan is that you can do that stuff later. You build the service, and if it's successful, which I think we all know it would be, then it's easy to make the case for smaller projects which support the line. As I mentioned before, at some point this project would require new trains, EMUs to be specific, but the reality is the New York region kind of needs a reason to get a train that looks like it's from this century anyways, with lots of large doors, a lighter construction, and higher performance than existing multiple units operating in the region. Of course, it would also need to be multi-mode, so it could operate on Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and New Jersey Transit trackage, which current trains cannot, though the M8 is quite interesting and very flexible. And as I said from the outset, this project would be transformative for New York for so many reasons. For one, it would give these systems a big boost. First, by relieving congestion at Penn Station and Grand Central Terminal by allowing passengers to stay on trains if they're continuing beyond those stations. That would also free up capacity on the subway because people wouldn't need to be shuttling back and forth between the multiple Manhattan stations to get from train to train. It would also mean much higher frequencies to suburban destinations, with many locations in the burbs going from 30 minutes or hourly service to service every 10, 15, or 20 minutes. Through running would also massively cut trip times because passengers wouldn't have to transfer in the city center and frequencies would be high enough that they wouldn't be waiting at platforms long either. The change in operating model also has the ability to save a lot of cost, both on the operating end by making operations more efficient through running, but also on rolling stock procurement by standardizing rolling stock requirements across the region and allowing the agencies to work together on mega-sized orders. All of those savings could then be reinvested into more service on the operating side and more useful infrastructure on the capital side. But probably most interestingly, these changes would allow tons of travel that isn't really practical today. And importantly, non-commute trips, which are most trips and also aren't hanging in the balance of some perceived work-from-home future. There are a ton of trips which cross-regional trains would open up. For example, allowing people in the regions north and west to get to beaches in the south and the east, as well as to get to destinations and events that aren't evenly distributed across the region. For example, someone who wants to go to a Chinese supermarket in Flushing, or a university in New Jersey, or a show in Harlem would easily be able to do so from across the region. It also makes traveling all across the region easier by removing a transfer from so many different trips, and it would allow passengers from one part of the city to use airports in another, making the air market in New York more competitive. Essentially, this proposal would make the entire New York City region act like a gigantic city, and that's an exciting option. And before you say that people aren't traveling from White Plains to Long Branch today, that's because they don't have great transportation options. The trips people make are going to be shaped by the transportation options they have, and I personally believe that more mobility is always going to be a good thing. It means more opportunity, a more interesting city, and more accessibility for everyone. Now, while researching for videos, I'll often come across different news and articles that are related to the topic I'm covering, and of course I'm quite on top of any breaking news from my Mastodon and Twitter feeds. The topic of the US federal government providing tons of new funding for various Amtrak projects, such as the replacement of the B&P Tunnel in Baltimore, has been especially pertinent in the news in the last couple of weeks, with more than 60 different news outlets covering it across the political spectrum who all have different motivations and biases with their reporting. In order to wade through the ocean of news and reporting, my go-to app and website, and the sponsor of today's video, is Ground News, an independent news platform designed to help you pull back the curtain on media bias, and featured in the MIT Technology Review. Articles from different sources on the same topic are grouped together on the same page, and broken down visually. For example, let's return to that story on Amtrak. Right away, you can see that the story was reported on by 68 sources. 38% of these sources lean left, while only 7% lean right. You can even tell by the difference in their headlines. Train enthusiast Joe Biden commits federal funds to rail network on the left, versus Biden administration to give billions to Amtrak as it hemorrhages cash on the right. You can also see who owns these news outlets and even their factuality ratings. And on individual articles, such as this one from the Huffington Post, you can see that the publication leans left, although the factuality leaves a lot to be desired. I also really love the insights Background AI features in each article, which gives a summary of reporting per political alignment and helps you quickly compare between them. And on this Amtrak story, we can easily see that the left is emphasizing the potential of this funding, adding new jobs and improving Amtrak infrastructure and service, while the right is in doubt of the federal funding source and the president's personal connection with Amtrak. And finally, one of my favorite features of Ground News is the blind spot feed, which shows you the stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum, so you can see clearly and think critically about the news you're being served and the message it's trying to send. Ground News has been a fantastic addition to my daily rotation, and it provides all of the tools you need to think critically about your news.
If you're interested in trying out Ground News, right now there's a huge Black Friday sale, which is their biggest of the year that lasts till the end of the month with 40% off the Vantage subscription, which grants you all of the features across the website including factuality and ownership scores and data, full access to your news bias, as well as unlimited access to all of the news feeds on the site. That's only $5 a month for more informed news coverage every day. And you can get this amazing discount right now if you go to my link at ground.news/RMTransit, which you can also find in the description. Again, that's ground.news/RMTransit. Go check out Ground News and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent right now.